There's a reason the Fates never intervened in the Titan Wars, but tonight they'll have to choose, save Zeus or let Olympus burn. For eons, the Fates had kept their distance from divine conflicts, weaving only the destinies of mortals from their sacred chamber. They watched as gods and titans clashed, knowing that meddling would disrupt the fragile balance of power. But now, as shadows crept across the eternal realm, their ancient neutrality was about to shatter. It began during the winter solstice feast. Zeus, the mighty king of Olympus, reached for his golden goblet and missed. His hand trembled, a sight no god had ever witnessed. The thunderous aura that once radiated from him flickered like a dying flame. Deep wrinkles etched themselves into his ageless face, his silver beard growing patchy and thin. Panic erupted in the great hall. Hermes dropped his caduceus, its snakes hissing in alarm. Apollo's lyre struck a discordant note that echoed through Mount Olympus. Even Dionysus set aside his wine, sobered by the sight of their failing king. In their sacred chamber, the three Fates faced their own crisis. Clotho's fingers fumbled through empty air where her spindle should have been. Lachesis measured nothing. The golden thread of Zeus's life had vanished. Atropos's shears hung useless at her side. The chamber, usually alive with the hum of spinning threads, fell silent. Countless mortal destinies hung frozen mid-weave as the sisters grappled with the unthinkable. The missing thread wasn't just any divine destiny. It was the backbone of Olympian order itself. "This is impossible," Clotho whispered, her ageless face betraying fear for the first time in eons. "The thread of an immortal cannot simply disappear unless—" Lachesis' voice trembled. "Unless immortality itself is unraveling." Atropos turned to her sisters, her dark eyes wide. "We swore never to touch the threads of the Titans or the Olympians. Their fates were meant to be eternal. Perhaps we should have," Clotho muttered, her fingers still searching desperately through the void where Zeus's thread should be. "Our inaction may have doomed us all." The words hung heavy in the air, a confession that shook the foundations of their ancient pact. Lachesis traced her measuring rod through the air, searching for any trace of the missing thread. "The balance is shifting," she announced, her voice hollow. "I can feel it in the weave of reality itself. Something is pulling at the very fabric of immortality." A scream pierced the night, echoing from the mortal world below. The Fates rushed to their viewing pool, its surface rippling to reveal a horrifying scene. The Titan Hyperion, wreathed in solar fire, stood over the broken form of Helios, a minor god of the sun. Golden ichor, divine blood, stained the earth, but as it flowed, it turned red. Helios's immortality drained away with each drop. His light dimmed, his skin wrinkled, and for the first time in eternity, a god tasted the bitter edge of mortality. His final words, carried on a winter wind, echoed across Olympus. "The Titans. They've returned." The Fates exchanged uneasy glances, their timeless faces etched with a worry they had never known. Atropos tightened her grip on her shears, the weight of an impossible choice pressing down on her. If gods could die, what did that mean for the weavers of fate? Their power was built on the unshakable foundation of divine immortality. "We must find Zeus's thread," Clotho declared, her voice steady despite the fear flickering in her eyes. "Before more of us fall." Lachesis nodded, her expression grim. "The Titans will pick off the weakest first, minor gods, then the rest. Without Zeus at full strength, they'll tear down the pillars of creation." Atropos finished. She turned to the great tapestry that adorned their chamber, its threads a labyrinth of mortal and divine destinies. Among them, Zeus's golden thread had always shone brightest, a beacon of power and order. Now, it was gone, leaving only a gaping void where it once shimmered. The air in the chamber grew heavy, as if time itself hesitated. For eons, the Fates had remained in their sacred chamber, never interfering, never stepping into the chaos of gods or titans. But as another scream pierced the mortal realm, another deity struck down by Hyperion's wrath, they knew their neutrality was no longer an option. "Sisters," Clotho said, her hands finally stilling their frantic search, "we must leave this place." We must walk among mortals and gods alike to find what has been lost. The words felt like sacrilege, but the alternative was unthinkable. A cold wind swept through the chamber, extinguishing the eternal flames that had burned since the dawn of creation. In the darkness, the three sisters clasped hands, breaking their oldest oath. The fate of Olympus and existence itself now rested in their trembling fingers. The Titans emerged from their ancient prisons like shadows given form. Kronos led the charge, his scythe gleaming with a hunger for vengeance. Oceanus followed, his laughter mingling with the screams of mortals as his floods swallowed cities whole. The earth quaked beneath their steps. Atlas, freed from his eternal burden, hurled mountains like stones, reshaping the world with each throw. Prometheus, once a friend to humanity, now turned his foresight to their ruin, whispering strategies that even Kronos admired. Let them taste fear, Kronos growled, his voice like grinding stone. Let my son Zeus watch as his precious world crumbles. When mortality infects their veins, we'll remind them why Titans ruled first. On Olympus, chaos reigned where unity should have been. Apollo paced the marble halls, his golden hair dulled by worry. Perhaps if we surrender now, he suggested, his voice trembling, they'll show mercy. We're weakening by the hour. Someone muttered, the words heavy with dread. Mercy. Ares barked, his voice sharp as the blade he unsheathed. The metallic clang of his armor echoed through the hall. Have you forgotten who locked them away? They'll rip us apart, whether we surrender or not. We fight. The tension in Olympus was palpable, crackling like the fading remnants of Zeus's thunder. His absence loomed over every shadow, every whispered conversation. Hermes flitted between the arguing factions, his winged sandals barely skimming the ground as he delivered increasingly grim reports. Dionysus, usually the life of the party, sat slumped, his wine turning sour in its cups, his jovial mask replaced by a grimace of worry. Even Artemis, who rarely left her forests, stood among them, her silver bow gripped tightly, her gaze sharp and wary. Amid the chaos, Hera watched. Her serene expression betrayed nothing, but her eyes, those calculating, ever watchful eyes, missed nothing. She moved through the gathering like a spider spinning its web, her steps deliberate, her words measured. She found Demeter in the gardens, her sister's hands trembling as she touched the withered stalks of her once vibrant plants. Tears glistened in Demeter's eyes. Sister, Hera murmured, her voice soft but laced with urgency. Persephone is vulnerable in the underworld. Without Zeus's protection, who will ensure her safety when she returns to the surface? In his forge, Hephaestus worked feverishly, his hammer striking weakened celestial bronze with desperate force. Sparks flew, but the metal resisted, its divine essence flickering like a dying flame. Hera approached, her presence as smooth as the honeyed words she spoke. Your creations could defend Olympus, under the right leadership. Zeus's condition, it demands a steady hand to guide us. Hephaestus paused, his hammer hovering mid-air. Sweat dripped from his brow, his twisted features etched with exhaustion. His machines, once the pride of Olympus, now sputtered and sparked, their power waning like a fading heartbeat. The defenses are failing, he admitted, his voice rough. Perhaps new leadership could stabilize them. The gods' arguments echoed through the halls, but Hera's quiet conversations carried more weight. One by one, she gathered support, presenting herself as the reluctant savior, the only rational choice for Regent. Her every word dripped with concern for Zeus. Her every gesture spoke of duty. But in the quiet moments, when she watched her husband's deterioration, her eyes gleamed with something darker. Power, so long denied her, was now within reach. As Zeus's thunderbolts grew weaker, her influence grew stronger. She walked the empty halls of power, her mind replaying every slight, every betrayal, every moment she had been forced to smile through her rage. Now, mortality had achieved what millennia of scheming could not. It had brought the mighty king of gods to his knees. The irony was as sweet as ambrosia on her tongue. In the distance, another of Zeus's thunderbolts fizzled and died, its once mighty roar reduced to a faint echo. The fates' missing thread had done more than weaken Zeus. It had cracked the very foundation of divine authority. Minor gods began to vanish from their posts, fleeing to the mortal realm, hoping to hide among humans. Those who remained watched Hera's calculated movements with a mix of fear and desperate hope. Some whispered that she had known about Zeus's condition before anyone else, that perhaps she had even orchestrated it. But no one dared voice these suspicions aloud, not when survival itself seemed to hang by a thread as fragile as the ones the fates once wove. Outside, the night sky flickered as stars began to fade, their eternal light dimming just as Zeus's power had. The cosmic order itself seemed to unravel, thread by thread. A servant found Zeus's crown, fallen behind his empty throne. Hera picked it up, testing its weight for the good of Olympus. She murmured, though no one was there to hear, "Someone must lead." Hera ascended the steps of Olympus's great hall, each footfall echoing with purpose. The assembled gods watched in uneasy silence as she approached Zeus's vacant throne. Her white robes gleamed with threads of gold, and her crown, not Zeus's, but one of her own making, caught the eternal light. "I accept this burden," she declared, her voice carrying to every corner, "until our king recovers." The words tasted of false honey on her tongue. Behind her, Zeus lay in his chambers, his skin growing more papery by the hour, as the gods bowed their heads in acceptance. Only Athena remained straight-backed, her gray eyes sharp with suspicion. She watched Hera's hands, how they gripped the throne's armrests too tightly, how her smile never reached her eyes. In the shadows of the throne room, Demeter and Hephaestus exchanged knowing glances. Their support had been bought with promises, fertile lands for one, divine forge upgrades for the other. Yet even they couldn't ignore the cold calculation behind Hera's every move. The queen's fingers traced patterns on the throne's surface, ancient symbols that spoke of power rather than stewardship. Later that night, Athena followed the sound of whispered incantations through shadowed corridors. She traced Hera's footsteps to a hidden chamber where Hecate waited, surrounded by dancing purple flames. "The spell holds," Hecate murmured to Hera. "His immortality continues to drain. But the fates are powerless without their tool." Hera interrupted. "Continue your work." Down in Athens, those very fates walked among mortals for the first time in millennia. Clotho's fingers twitched, aching for her missing spindle. Around them, the city burned. Titans' shadows passed overhead, sending humans scrambling for shelter. The streets they walked were littered with broken offerings and trampled laurel wreaths. Prayers went unanswered now, rising like smoke into a sky that no longer cared. A temple of Apollo lay in ruins, its golden roof torn away by giant hands. The fates paused before a fallen statue of Zeus, its face now weathered as if centuries had passed in days. "Look what they've done to our work," Lachesis whispered, watching a mother drag her children into a temple. Generations of carefully woven destinies, unraveling. Atropos clutched her shears, now useless without thread to cut. We should never have woven the Titans' fates. Some threads were meant to remain untouched. A man approached them, eyes wild with fear and anger. "You," he shouted, recognizing their ancient faces. "You control our destinies! Why have you abandoned us? Our children die while the gods play their games." A woman shrieked, clutching an empty cradle. The fates recognized her, or rather, they recognized the thread of her life, one they had woven with such precision and care. She should have had decades more, her line stretching into a future now shrouded in uncertainty. Clotho reached instinctively for her spindle, her fingers grasping at empty air where it should have been. More voices rose around them, a crowd gathering with accusation burning in their eyes. The fates, these architects of destiny, now faced the consequences of their unraveling creation. "We haven't abandoned you," Clotho tried to explain, but her words were swallowed by a deafening rumble. Not the familiar crack of Zeus's thunder, but the earth, shaking footsteps of approaching titans. The ground trembled with each colossal step, their towering shadows blotting out the sun, turning day into dust. Oceanus's waters surged through the lower city, swallowing streets and homes, while Hyperion's fiery touch set rooftops ablaze. In the distance, Atlas's laughter boomed like thunder as he tore down the city walls with terrifying ease. These were the beings whose fates the sisters had once dared to weave, and now their handiwork was unraveling thread by thread. The Fates exchanged uneasy glances, their immortal faces etched with a fear they hadn't known since the dawn of creation. Atropos's hand brushed the empty space at her belt where her golden shears should have hung, while Lachesis' measuring rod trembled in her grip. Without their sacred tools, they were little more than witnesses to the destruction they had once controlled. The threads of fate, once so meticulously measured and cut, now whipped wildly in the cosmic winds, their ends fraying like the very fabric of reality itself. The crowd scattered as buildings crumbled around them. Through the chaos, the Fates caught sight of their destination, a humble weaver's shop where salvation or doom awaited. As they approached, the air grew thick with an ancient power, not the raw, chaotic force of the Titans, but something older, more primordial. It was the power of destiny itself, concentrated and waiting, like a spider in its web. The Fates could feel it pulling them forward. Even as every step filled them with dread, the Weaver's domain sprawled before them, a labyrinth of tangled threads stretching into an impossible darkness. The air shimmered with abandoned destinies, each strand glowing faintly like dying stars. Arachne's lair wasn't hard to find. They simply followed the sound of bitter laughter. She hung suspended from the ceiling, her 8 legs moving with fluid grace across her web. Her once human face still held traces of beauty, though her eyes now gleamed with the wisdom of Ons. The mighty Fates, she sneered, reduced to begging help from a cursed one. Lo, Clotho stepped forward, her ancient pride warring with desperation. Seek Zeus's thread. You've taken it. Taken? No. Protected. Her action descended, her massive form casting long shadows across the walls. I've watched you 3 for centuries, weaving destinies as if they were simple tapestries. But you're not infallible, are you? When the Fates exchanged uneasy glances, their silence speaking volumes. They had seen the cost of hubris countless times in the threads they wove. But facing their own was another matter entirely. The chamber grew colder as Arachne circled them, her movements deliberate, predatory. Each step was a reminder of their role in her transformation, of the pride that had cursed her. Perhaps, they thought, this was justice long overdue. Lachesis stiffened. What do you want? Arachne. Confession, the spider woman hissed, her voice heavy with centuries of pain. Admit that you can fail, that you did fail. Tell me why you truly stopped weaving the Titans' destinies. The memory struck Clotho like a blow. She saw it again. The day Kronos' thread had turned black in her hands, twisting into something monstrous. She had tried to weave order into his destiny, but his nature rejected it. The thread snapped, and with it, their confidence in controlling such primal forces. The threads had burned their hands that day, searing with a power even they, the shapers of destiny, couldn't contain. The Titan's essence was chaos itself, raw, untamable. One by one, their threads had turned volatile, each more destructive than the last. Oceanus's thread flooded their chamber, Hyperion's scorched their ancient tools, and Atlas's threatened to crush their very realm. What couldn't control them? Clotho admitted, her voice barely a whisper. Their power was too vast, too chaotic. We chose to focus on mortals instead, leaving the gods to their own fates. And now look what that decision has wrought. Arachne sneered, gesturing to the mortal realm below, where Titans rampaged unchecked. Your abandonment of divine destiny has led to this. Zeus's thread lies corrupted, because you refused to maintain it. The corruption had begun subtly, a creeping gray that dimmed the golden shine of divinity. They had noticed it first in the minor gods, threads growing dull and brittle, but they had dismissed it, convinced the greater gods were immune. Now, as Zeus's thread pulsed with mortality, they realized their mistake. The decay they had ignored had reached the very heart of Olympus. Arachne reached into her web and pulled out a gleaming strand. Once brilliant gold, it now pulsed with a sickly gray light. Here's your precious king's destiny. But touch it, and you risk spreading mortality to yourselves. Are you prepared to pay that price? Atropos reached for her shears, their edge glinting in the ethereal light. Perhaps, she mused, it would be kinder to cut it now, before the corruption spreads further. But Clotho stayed her sister's hand. They had seen too many threads end, too many destinies conclude in darkness. This wasn't just about Zeus anymore. It was about the very nature of immortality itself. Could even the eternal be temporary? The chamber grew darker as their decision loomed. In all their existence, they had never faced such a choice. The corruption in Zeus's thread pulsed like a living thing, hungry to spread its mortality. Each pulse of the corrupted thread sent ripples through the surrounding strands, threatening to unravel the very fabric of divine order. The Fates stood around it, their eternal faces etched with fear for the first time in creation. This was no ordinary thread. It was Zeus's destiny, and it was dying. To touch it might doom them, but to leave it untouched would surely doom Olympus. Clotho reached out, her fingers trembling, but Atropos caught her wrist. Sister, think carefully. This thread isn't just damaged, it's dying. In the distance, thunder rumbled faintly, a weak echo of Zeus's once mighty power. His fading strength left the barriers, holding back the Titans dangerously thin. The corruption in the thread spread faster than anyone had anticipated, gnawing at the essence of immortality itself. A shadow fell across the chamber as Hera materialized, her presence both regal and menacing. She ignored the Fates, her gaze locked on the corrupted thread. So this is what remains of my husband's greatness, she murmured, her voice cold. The Fates exchanged uneasy glances. They had foreseen this moment in their weaving, but witnessing it unfold was another matter entirely. The thread writhed in Arachne's grasp, dark tendrils of mortality reaching out like claws, seeking to infect the immortal realm. Clotho clutched her spindle tighter, her mind flashing back to the first Titan war, when Kronos had devoured his own children. You shouldn't be here, Lachesis warned, her voice sharp. Hera merely smiled, her eyes glinting with a darkness that hadn't been there before. I go where I please now, she said. Olympus needs leadership, strong leadership. Zeus's time is ending. We all see it. The chamber grew colder as a massive figure emerged from the shadows. Kronos, Lord of the Titans, his presence making the threads of fate tremble. Indeed, daughter-in-law, he rumbled. You've done well. The Fates' faces paled as understanding dawned. Hera had orchestrated it all. Zeus's weakening, the Titans' return, even the thread's corruption. She stood proudly beside Kronos, her ambition laid bare. The ancient walls of the chamber pulsed with each revelation, centuries of divine power recoiling at the betrayal. Threads of destiny quivered in their webs, some snapping under the weight of shifting fates. The Moirai watched in horror as golden strands of immortality darkened, spreading from Zeus's thread like a plague through their carefully woven tapestry. This was more than treachery. It was the unraveling of the divine order itself. The old order must fall, Hera declared. I've arranged for the Titans to retake their throne, with certain accommodations for myself, of course. A new age begins today. Athena burst into the chamber, her owl screeching a warning.
The thread!
She cried, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. It's not just Zeus's life force. It's tied to all of Olympus. She clutched an ancient text, its pages glowing with forbidden knowledge. If Zeus dies like this, if his thread is severed while corrupted, every god will fall to mortality. It's a chain reaction. The realization struck them like a thunderbolt. Every thread in the chamber began to glow, revealing the intricate web connecting all immortals. Zeus's thread wasn't just one strand in the tapestry. It was the foundation, the first thread ever woven into the fabric of divinity. Without it, the entire weave would unravel. Eons of balance, the very structure of divine power, all hinged on this single golden thread, now tainted beyond repair. Hera's triumphant smirk faltered. This wasn't part of her deal with Kronos. The Titan Lord's laughter rumbled like grinding mountains. Did you think I'd share power, little goddess? When Zeus falls, Olympus will be ripe for reclamation. Atropos raised her shears, their celestial bronze glinting in the dim light. We warned you, Hera. We showed you this path in your own thread, but you ignored it. Now all of creation hangs by a fraying string. The eldest Fate's hands trembled, not with age, but with fury. For the first time in eons, the one who ended all things feared what her scissors might unleash. The corrupted thread flickered weakly in Arachn's web, its pulse fading. Time was running out, and the stakes were clear. This wasn't just about saving Zeus. It was about preventing the collapse of divinity itself. Atropos hesitated, her blade hovering over Zeus's thread. Perhaps this is how it should end. A dignified death, not this slow decay. You can't be serious, Clotho protested, but her sister's expression was unyielding. We've seen mortals face their end with grace. Why should gods be any different? The oldest fate's voice carried the weight of eternity. Sometimes, sister, death is a gift. The chamber shuddered as another blast of Titan magic struck Olympus's defenses. Through the crystalline walls, they watched Apollo racing across the heavens, his golden chariot trailing fire as he evaded Hyperion's attacks. The sun god's face was etched with desperation as he landed before them. "I've seen it," Apollo gasped, his radiance dimmed. Two paths, both catastrophic. In one, Zeus dies and mortality claims us all. In the other, he faltered, his prophetic gift showing horrors he could barely speak of. The Titans rule again. Their vengeance will remake the world into something unrecognizable. Silence fell as Apollo's prophecy sank in. Lachesis traced Zeus's thread, feeling its weakened fibers. The thread doesn't lie. Every future leads to ruin. She paused, her ancient eyes narrowing. Unless we consider something unprecedented, the thread wasn't just dying. It was evolving. Perhaps mortality itself was the key to survival. Before anyone could respond, the chamber doors burst open. Hera strode in, clad in full battle regalia, an army of minor gods trailing behind her, their loyalty pledged to her cause. Enough deliberation, she demanded, her voice sharp. Hand over the thread. You don't understand what you're doing, Athena warned. Stepping between Hera and the fates, the Titans won't honor any deal you've made. I understand perfectly. Hera snapped, her eyes blazing. Zeus's rule has grown weak. Olympus needs strength again, and the Titans offer that strength. Strength. Athena's laugh was bitter. You've been blinded by your own ambition, mother. Look around you. The very foundations of Olympus crack under Kronos' power. Your bargain hasn't brought strength. It's brought our doom. The goddess of wisdom raised her spear, its tip gleaming with divine light. And now you'll force us to choose between surrender and extinction. The words had barely left her mouth when the entire mountain shook. A massive hand, woven from shadow and malice, burst through the chamber wall. Kronos' voice boomed through the debris. The time for pretense is over. His fingers curled around broken marble columns, crushing them to dust. Gods and goddesses who had never known true fear felt it now, as the shadow of their ancient enemy fell across them. Those who had sided with Hera realized too late the magnitude of their betrayal, their faces pale with the understanding that they had invited this doom upon themselves. Chaos erupted. The loyal gods clashed with Hera's followers, while the Titans pressed their advantage. In the midst of the battle, Zeus's thread pulsed weaker and weaker, each flutter bringing all of Olympus closer to mortality. Athena fought her way to the fates, deflecting a blast of dark energy with her shield. There must be another way, she pleaded. Some path we haven't seen. The fates exchanged glances, a silent understanding passing between them. Clotho's fingers began to glow as she touched the corrupted thread. Mortality was never meant to be a curse, she whispered. It was a gift, the gift of meaning, of precious moments, of evolution. Around them, the battle raged on, but in that instant, something shifted in the very fabric of destiny. Apollo's eyes suddenly blazed with divine light. The thread, it's not just corrupted, it's changing. What if mortality isn't a curse, but a transformation? The chamber floor cracked beneath their feet as divine energy surged through the ancient stones. Minor gods scattered, their immortal forms flickering like candlelight in a storm. Hera's followers began to retreat, their confidence shattered by the raw power emanating from the Titan Lord. Even Hera herself took a step back, her regal facade crumbling as she witnessed the true extent of Kronos' might. The very air seemed to crystallize, time itself bending to his will as he approached the fates. Before he could explain further, Kronos' massive form filled the chamber. The Titan Lord's hand closed around the thread, his touch warping the fabric of reality itself. The age of the gods ends now, he declared, his voice echoing with the weight of Ons. Athena stepped forward, her spear leveled at the fates. Stop! You speak of destiny as if it's unchangeable. but we've seen mortals defy their fates time and time again. Clotho's ancient eyes widened in disbelief. You dare threaten us, child of Zeus? I dare to challenge your assumptions, Athena shot back, her voice steady despite the chaos erupting around them. How many heroes have risen above their so-called destinies? Perseus, Odysseus, even Hercules. Their stories prove that fate is not set in stone. The chamber shuddered as another wave of Titan magic crashed against Olympus's faltering defenses. Through the fractured walls, Arachne's silhouette loomed against the stormy sky, her eight-legged form a haunting reminder of divine retribution. The ground beneath them crackled with ancient energy as another explosion rocked the foundations of Olympus. In the distance, Poseidon's trident clashed against Oceanus's waves, while Hades' shadowy warriors struggled to hold back the advancing Titan army. Time was running out. Every moment spent arguing brought them closer to defeat. You speak of those we cursed for their defiance, Lachesis warned, her voice sharp. I speak of those who prove destiny can be rewritten, Athena countered. Arachne, you who once challenged the gods, help us now. The cursed weaver descended into the chamber on a thread of starlight, her spider-like form glowing with an otherworldly radiance. You cursed me for daring to weave as beautifully as the gods, she said, her voice tinged with bitterness. Perhaps now you'll see that true beauty lies in imperfection. Her 8 legs moved with an eerie grace as she approached, each step leaving trails of silvery webbing that shimmered with fragments of her mortal past, memories of a time when her hands had created works that reveled the gods themselves. The chamber filled with the ethereal glow of her weaving, casting shifting shadows that danced across the ancient walls like fragments of forgotten dreams. Arachne moved toward Zeus's corrupted thread, her many eyes gleaming with ancient wisdom. Divine threads aren't meant to be perfect, she said softly. They're meant to be strong. As she began to weave her own essence into the thread, her form started to dissolve into pure light. What are you doing? Atropos demanded, her voice trembling. Giving you a choice, Arachne replied, her voice growing faint. Divinity without humanity is nothing but cold power. Sometimes, a thread must break to become stronger. The Fates watched in stunned silence as their former victim became their salvation. Clotho's fingers trembled on her spindle, Lachesis' measuring rod slipped from her grasp, and even Atropos lowered her scissors. They had never witnessed such a willing sacrifice, such a profound understanding of the delicate balance between mortality and divinity. Around them, the very fabric of fate began to shift and reform. The chamber seemed to hold its breath as ancient magic collided with mortal resolve, reshaping the destiny of gods and titans alike. In that moment, the line between god and mortal blurred, unveiling a truth the fates had long ignored. That true power lies not in flawless immortality, but in the courage to risk everything for what truly matters. As the last traces of Arachne's form dissolved into Zeus's thread, it began to pulse with a new energy. No longer the pure gold of divinity, but something richer, woven with the resilience of mortals. Meanwhile, Hera's allies abandoned her one by one, horrified by the Titan's unchecked brutality. She stood alone, her schemes unraveling around her. Zeus, please, she pleaded, her voice trembling as she knelt beside her unconscious husband. I only wanted her crown, the symbol of her fleeting reign, rolled across the floor, its golden light fading into nothing. The other gods turned away, unable to bear the sight of her fall from grace. In that moment, Hera understood the cost of her ambition, not just power, but family, trust, and love. The bitter taste of victory turned to ash in her mouth. She reached for Zeus with trembling fingers, her voice barely a whisper. I wanted to prove I was worthy of standing beside you, not just as your wife, but as your equal. The irony struck her like a blow. In her quest to prove her worth, she had lost everything that made her worthy in the first place. Her words were cut short as Kronos' power hurled her against a marble column. Zeus stirred faintly, too weak to intervene. Your betrayal will not be forgotten, Athena said coldly, her gaze fixed on her stepmother before turning to the Fates. Now choose. Will you cling to your old ways and watch Olympus fall, or will you help us rewrite destiny itself? The Fates gathered around Zeus's transformed thread, their ancient hands trembling. To alter a divine thread is to alter the fabric of existence itself, Clotho whispered, her fingers hovering over the glowing strand. Then let existence change. Lachesis replied, her voice steady as she grasped the thread. Golden light mingled with mortal darkness, coursing through her immortal form, and she cried out in pain. The ritual began. Each fate took her place around the thread, their own immortality bleeding into the weave. The chamber filled with an otherworldly glow as divine and mortal essences merged. Outside, Kronos' army breached the outer gates of Olympus. Poseidon's trident flashed through the storm-dark sky, clashing against Oceanus' tidal wave. Below, Hades emerged from a chasm in the earth, his black armor absorbing Hyperion's searing attacks. Brother, they called to each other across the battlefield. Hold the line! The two gods stood back to back, defending their younger brother's throne, as the fates fought to save his life. Centuries of rivalry dissolved in the face of annihilation. Divine blood splattered the marble steps of Olympus, and the columns trembled with each clash of celestial weapons. Artemis's silver arrows pierced the twilight sky, while Apollo's golden chariot blazed across the heavens, driving back the advancing Titans. For every Titan they repelled, two more rose to take its place. The very foundations of Olympus groaned under the weight of immortal combat, the air thick with the clash of divine and primal forces. Inside the chamber, Zeus's eyes snapped open. His once perfect form now bore the marks of mortality. Silver streaked his beard, lines etched his face, yet his eyes held something new, something profound. Father, he called out to Kronos, his voice carrying the weight of mortal wisdom. You fear death because you've never truly lived. The Titan King faltered, his scythe a-trembling as he beheld his son transformed. Zeus rose, lightning crackling around him. Not the pure, untouchable divine power of before, but something welder, more primal. Human. The lightning flickered with strange new hues, not just the blinding white of the heavens, but the deep blues of mortal oceans and the fierce reds of human passion. His power, once untouchable, now pulsed with the rhythm of mortal hearts. The gods watched in awe as their king wielded this hybrid force, this union of divine might and mortal will. What sorcery is this? Kronos demanded, his voice trembling with unease. Not sorcery. Zeus replied, his voice steady. Growth. He raised his hand, and the lightning that answered was shot through with mortal determination. The same force that had driven humans to master fire, to build cities, to challenge the gods themselves. For the first time in his eternal existence, Kronos took a step back. In his son's weathered face, he saw something he had never encountered before, the power of a being who understood both strength and weakness, victory and loss. The Titan army hesitated, sensing the change in their adversary. This was not the arrogant young god who had cast them into Tartarus. This was something new, a being who understood the value of every moment because it could now see its own end. Zeus raised both hands to the sky, and the clouds above Olympus swirled with unprecedented force. Divine lightning merged with mortal determination, creating a storm unlike any the cosmos had ever witnessed. In that moment, even the most hardened Titans understood what they faced. This wasn't just Zeus wielding a new form of power. This was the birth of something that had never existed before, a being who carried both the strength of divinity and the fierce will of mortality. The lightning that crackled around him spoke of sunrise, struggles, and twilight triumphs, of the countless small battles that made up a mortal life. His weathered face showed wisdom earned through loss, and his eyes held the fire of one who knew the true value of each heartbeat. The Titans, in their eternal unchanging existence, had never known such depth. They had never understood that true strength comes not from being unbreakable, but from being broken and rising again. As the battle raged, the fates collapsed, their immortality draining away with each passing moment as they stabilized the new cosmic order. Atropos, the oldest of the three, smiled as her form began to fade. Sister, Clotho cried, reaching for her, but Atropos's voice was soft, almost peaceful. Finally rest. Her sisters watched as starlight began to seep through Atropos's form, her body growing translucent, like a veil caught in the wind. Millennia of weaving and snipping the threads of fate had led her to this moment, a moment where even the weavers of destiny could finally understand the bittersweet beauty of an end. The chamber filled with a soft, golden glow as Atropos began to fade, her ancient power scattering like mist under the morning sun. "Don't mourn," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "For the first time since creation, I can rest. Sometimes an ending is a gift." Above, Zeus's lightning tore through the sky, each bolt crackling with the raw energy of mortal resolve. The Titans faltered, their immortal certainty crumbling under the weight of this new, unfamiliar power. Prometheus, who had been chained for aeons for daring to gift fire to humanity, shattered his bonds and stood beside Zeus. "I chose humanity once," he declared, his voice steady. "I choose them again." His defiance sparked a ripple of doubt among the Titan ranks, their loyalty to Kronos' stagnant rule wavering. The battle raged across Olympus's glittering spires, the air thick with the clash of divine and mortal wills. Athena, her strategic brilliance sharpened by her newfound respect for mortal ingenuity, led a charge against Atlas. But Kronos' scythe sliced through the chaos, its blade arcing toward her neck. The ground trembled as Poseidon's waves crashed against Oceanus' forces, and Hades emerged from the shadows with an army of shades. For the first time since the original Titan War, the brothers fought side by side, their powers intertwining in ways they had never dared to imagine. Mortal prayers echoed in their ears, each whispered plea lending strength to their strikes. Then, from the chaos, Hera appeared, throwing herself between Kronos' scythe and Athena. The blade bit deep into her immortal flesh. "No more plots," she gasped, her royal robes stained crimson. "No more schemes. Just justice." She collapsed into Athena's arms, her divine light flickering like a dying flame. Zeus roared in anguish, his attack driving Kronos back. For the first time, fear flickered across the Titan King's face as his son's power, infused with the strength of mortality, proved greater than his own. The Fates, their forms growing faint, worked desperately to stabilize the unraveling cosmos. Atropos' hands trembled as she lifted her shears one final time. "We were wrong," she said to her sisters. "Destiny isn't a prison, it's a journey." Their ancient eyes had witnessed the rise and fall of countless ages, yet never had they seen such courage in the face of annihilation. As their immortality slipped away, they felt what mortals had always known, the fragile, precious weight of each fleeting moment. Lachesis smiled as she measured her own thread for the first time. "Then let us complete ours," Clotho replied. Together, they poured their remaining power into the threads of reality. Their bodies dissolved into stardust, but their sacrifice anchored a new order, a world where even gods could grow, change, and learn from the fleeting beauty of mortality. Kronos made his final stand atop Olympus's highest peak, his voice a thunderous roar. "You would destroy everything we are," he bellowed at Zeus. "No, Father," Zeus replied, his voice steady, his eyes blazing with the fire of a mortal's resolve. "I would rebuild it. I would help us become what we could be." His lightning, now streaked with hues of humanity, red for passion, blue for wisdom, green for growth, struck Kronos with full force. The Titan King fell, not destroyed but transformed, his power bound by the same mortality that had reshaped his son. Around them, the surviving gods stood in awe as mortality's touch seeped into the very fabric of Olympus. The cold marble halls warmed with earthy tones, flowers sprouted through celestial tiles, and the eternal flames flickered with the vibrant colors of human emotion. Even the ambrosia shifted, its taste now carrying the richness of mortal flavors, honey, wine, and the salt of human tears. The transformation rippled outward, touching every corner of the divine realm. The golden apples of the Hesperides now bore the sweet, tart complexity of mortal fruit, and Poseidon's immortal horses whinnied with a newfound vitality. The eternal realm, once unchanging, now pulsed with life in ways it never had before. As dawn broke over a transformed Olympus, the battle came to an end. Hera's body had vanished, leaving behind only a single peacock feather that glowed with an unfamiliar, mortal warmth. Athena clutched it tightly, her understanding deepening. Power and wisdom could wear many faces. The remaining Titans, seeing their leader humbled, laid down their weapons one by one. Some chose to embrace this new way, their harsh immortal light softening with understanding. Others retreated to the far reaches of the cosmos, where they might still linger, watching and waiting. But Olympus would never again be threatened by their unyielding nature. In the aftermath, whispers spread among mortals of gods walking among them, sharing in their struggles and learning their ways. The Olympians discovered that their power, though altered, had grown deeper, rooted in understanding rather than mere authority. The age of distant, unchanging gods had ended. A new era had dawned, one where divinity and humanity would grow together, each learning from the other's strengths and vulnerabilities. Olympus rose anew from the ashes of battle, its marble halls now streaked with veins of mortal metals, bronze, iron, and gold. Zeus stood before the assembled gods, his beard streaked with gray, his eyes carrying the weight of wisdom earned through vulnerability. "We rebuild not as rulers," he declared, "but as guardians who understand what it means to be mortal." He gestured to the empty thrones beside him. "From this day forward, our council includes those we once merely watched from above." A group of mortals ascended the celestial steps, philosophers, artists, warriors who had proven their worth, not through immortality, but through the very humanity the gods had come to value. Among them walked the shade of Arachne, restored not to life but to honor, her wisdom now sought rather than scorned. Athena approached the Parthenon's highest point, her chisel burning with divine fire. Into the living stone, Athena carved words that would echo through the ages. Even destinies can change. Below this declaration, she etched the images of those who had taught this lesson: Hera's sacrifice, Arachne's redemption, and the Fates' final gift. Standing before the assembled crowd, Athena spoke with quiet reverence. "We honor those who showed us a better path. Hera, who learned too late, but taught us all that redemption comes from action, not power. The Fates, who gave up eternity to prove that destiny is not a cage but a choice." The reconstruction of Olympus brought changes no one had foreseen. The rigid hierarchy of golden thrones gave way to circular chambers, where gods and mortals now counseled as equals. Hephaestus forged new artifacts, blending divine power with mortal ingenuity, while Dionysus's festivals celebrated both immortal glory and human perseverance. Even the underworld transformed, as Hades collaborated with mortal scholars to better understand the delicate balance between life and death. As night fell over the transformed Olympus, a single thread appeared in the heavens, not woven by immortal hands, but spun from the collective hopes and dreams of gods and mortals alike. It pulsed with an inner light, neither divine nor human, but something entirely new. Apollo studied the celestial thread, his prophetic gifts reshaped by recent events. "The fates are gone," he mused, "but perhaps fate itself has evolved. Not a decree from above, but a tapestry we all weave together." The remaining titans, those who had chosen peace over vengeance, were granted places in this new order. Their ancient wisdom, tempered now by understanding rather than dominance, added depth to the council's deliberation. Oceanus's waters no longer threatened to drown cities, but instead nourished them with the knowledge of ages past. Even Prometheus, long forgiven, shared freely the gifts of foresight and innovation. In the mortal world below, temples began to change. No longer mere places of worship, they became sanctuaries where humanity and divinity could meet as equals. The offerings left at altars were not just sacrifices but ideas, dreams, and wisdom shared between realms. Zeus touched the thread of mortality that now wove through his own being. "We were stagnant in our perfection," he acknowledged. "Now we are perfect in our ability to change." Demeter and Persephone established new rhythms for the seasons, ones that responded to mortal needs while maintaining nature's delicate balance. The harvest became a joint celebration, where divine blessing met human effort halfway. In the forests, Artemis taught her hunters to be guardians rather than mere pursuers, while Hermes's travelers carried not just messages, but understanding between the realms. The boundaries between godly and mortal realms softened, though they did not disappear entirely. Where once divine power meant absolute authority, it now meant greater responsibility. The gods learned to listen before acting, to understand before judging. Their immortality became not a mark of superiority, but a tool to better serve and protect the delicate balance between realms. Even the youngest nymphs and minor deities found themselves drawn to this new era, trading rigid hierarchies for the warmth of shared purpose. As the first light of the new age broke over Olympus, a single thread of light still shimmered in the night sky, weaving patterns no one had ever seen. Was it Hera's final gift, a titan's chance at redemption, or the birth of something entirely unknown? The story of Olympus was no longer etched in unyielding stone, but written in the shifting hearts of gods and mortals, forever intertwined.